Let's go ski every run at Granite Peak. What's going on, Midwest skiers and riders? Matthew Zaransky with MidwestSkiers.com. We have an awesome episode for you today. We're going to be exploring Wisconsin's biggest ski area, Granite Peak or Rib Mountain, depending on when you grew up with it. We'll talk about the history and all of that during the POV session. This area has a lot of history, a lot of good terrain to check out, and I'm really excited to obviously share this with you. If you guys are interested in watching more videos like this, or you enjoy this video, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We obviously put a lot of time and effort into these videos, so you can decide where you want to go skiing, and if there's any areas that you want to see as we build out our upcoming schedule for this season, this would be the 2025-26 season, be sure to drop that in the comments below, because we're already starting to get there as far as building our schedule for this season. This was one that last couple years has been requested many times, so we wanted to make sure that we got it to all of you. And we got a lot to talk about, so without further ado, let's dive right into some basic information. So all the footage that you're about to see on screen here was filmed on March 6th, 2025. It was a Thursday. I have a couple of notes. I want to paint a little bit of a picture for you. Wisconsin and Minnesota had a really nice cold year, but not a lot of natural snow. So you'll kind of see that there's a little bit in the trees, but not as much as I would say a normal year, probably a little bit lower tide than normal. Not only that, this week in particular was a heavy freeze thaw cycle. And if you don't know what that means, basically what happened is it got up to like 60 degrees, then all of a sudden plunged down to like the lower 20s in a matter of like 24 hours or so. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the closures that they had, but that's why you might even be able to hear it. It's really hard packed. I will give Granite Peak a lot of credit, given how rough of the conditions they had to deal with were. I thought they did an amazing job getting this groomed out the best that they possibly could, but at the end of the day, anything that basically they couldn't till up really well, just a layer of ice. And that was actually some of the reason that ski runs like Mission Ridge, for example, a bump run kind of on the east side over there, was closed just because it was just pure ice, a sheet of ice basically. And you'll kind of see that actually as the day went on, it thawed out a little bit and things were skiing a lot better. But just kind of paint that picture for you a little bit. They do a great job over there. These are one of those things that's just like, yep, this is what happens in the Midwest sometimes. You get these heavy freeze-thaw cycles, and we happen to be hitting that on that day. As far as location, it's in Wausau, Wisconsin. It's about 3 hours northwest of Milwaukee, a little over 4 hours north of Chicago, and about 3 hours east of Minneapolis. It's kind of like smack dab right in the middle there. They usually open for the season in late November, usually that Thanksgiving weekend. And then they go pretty dang late, actually one of the latest in this region. So obviously like Lutsen goes really late, we have Boyne on the other side of the lake, and I would say Granite Peak is definitely one of those, the latest in Wisconsin, at least historically the last handful of years. Usually it'll go until late March, sometimes even early April, just depending on how conditions and crowds are. So if you're looking for a late season game, this is one of them. In early season, they usually open with a lot of terrain, their snowmaking systems. Pretty impressive. We'll get into talking a little bit more about that as we get through the POVs. But as far as pricing goes, now they do kind of like a dynamic style pricing. It's going to kind of depend on when you buy it and then the dates that you're looking for. But I would say that these were kind of the averages that I was coming up with. Adults will run you about $99 for weekends and holidays for a full day, $74 on weekdays. Children will be $64 on weekends and holidays, and $44 on weekdays. They do offer a night ticket on weekends and holidays. That's going to run you $49. And then they do have a really good midweek special for night tickets, $35. And on Wednesdays, they actually do it for $22. That's actually the best value if you're looking to get that. Of course, with all of this information, whenever we do these, just go to the website to check out the latest pricing information. This stuff changes all the time. So they also offer rentals and lessons as well. Again, we'll link all that information below. Just go check out their website if you guys are interested in that. They also offer a 3-day flex pass. Obviously they have season passes, but I thought this was an interesting option. So for somebody that thinks they're going to go to Granite Peak a handful of times a year, this could be an option for you. So a 3-day flex pass, you can use it any day, no blackout dates. For adults, it runs $237, and for kids, it's $147. So shave some dollars off of that kind of that daily lift ticket price. So if you don't want to commit to a full season pass, that could be an option as well. And then obviously they're on the Indy Pass as well. So if that is something you have, they accept that there too. As far as trails go, they have 68 named trails. There's a lot of connector slash like trails. Like you do one run and it might be like 3 different runs. Pretty typical for the Midwest. I would say probably it's more like 40-ish. Number of chairlifts, they have 5 chairlifts. 3 of those are high speed and they have 2 carpets. Now we did only do 1 carpet because the lower carpet that they usually use for lessons was closed. They only usually run that on weekends, holidays, and during lessons. The bigger carpet was open. As far as vertical rise goes, we always use Google Earth for this information just so we can get you the most accurate information. The 3 pods were kind of ranging anywhere from 500 to 600 feet of vert. The western area was getting about 600. The central pod was 575, and then Cupid was maybe about 500. So it kind of depended on where you're taking them from, but still very, very big for the Midwest. Definitely on the upper side of ski areas across the Midwest. And I know one thing is their lift tickets are a little bit expensive, especially for the Midwest, but not only are you getting obviously some legitimate vertical, but you're also getting some crazy infrastructure. The fact that they have 3 high speeds, basically you can access every run at their ski area with a high speed lift, which is pretty phenomenal and pretty rare in the Midwest. And one more thing I just wanted to point out really quick is that they do have 2 different chalets. Your ticketing is going to be basically in the administrative office. So it's going to be the left-hand side of their little village that they kind of have set up there. Rental is going to be smack dab in the middle of all those buildings. And then you have the historic chalet and the Sundance chalet. The historic chalet was like the original chalet that opened in the 30s with the ski area. Stone building, super beautiful, really tight spacing though, and very limited kind of tables and space and amenities and things like that. The Sundance chalet, which opened, I believe, in the 2000s, that's a more recent one. That one's a lot more spacious. So I usually recommend if the Sundance chalet is open, I would definitely recommend going over there, and that's where the bulk of the traffic will go. It's not always open, and then same thing, the hours kind of change on both of these chalets, so you just want to double check that. And then they have the ski school yurt, which is located kind of over by their beginner carpet, which is all the way, if you're looking at the hill, it'll be all the way kind of on the left-hand side over there. So kind of give you a little lay of the land really quick as far as their little village that they have kind of set up at the bottom there. So, but without further ado, let's dive right on into the POVs. We're going to get started as we always do, kind of on Looker's left-hand side. So this is technically starting up with Overlook, which is kind of a connector trail. We're going to take that to Shadowridge, and then we're going to take Sidewinder on the way down. On our left-hand side here, you can see there's pockets of trees. This is skiable if they have enough natural snow. Now, this year, like I was mentioning earlier, just not a great year for natural snow. There was like a couple of weeks in there that like a lot of this would have been skiable, but when I went, it was just, first of all, it was frozen over, but there was just not a lot of natural snow to begin with. And then also same thing on our skiers' right-hand side, there's also Berg's Boundary, which is another kind of treed area. So as you come around the corner here, the one thing you're going to notice about Granite Peak is a lot of the runs are going to be profiled very similarly. They're going to have a steeper upper section, they're going to start to flatten out, and then they're going to have kind of like almost like a run out section that's going to have a moderate lower pitch that kind of feeds all the way back down to the lift. So Shadowridge is kind of that steeper section, and then it kind of takes this left-hand turn here and meets up with Sidewinder, which then becomes that kind of flat section in here. Now in this area, you can definitely bounce in between the woods if they're open. This is a thing a lot of the kids like to do, is kind of jump in between these little pods of skiing and these runs of skiing and ski some of this in between stuff. So we're going to run this one in, and then we're going to take the Cupid Express up. All right, this is the Cupid Express, a 2014 Lightner Palma high-speed quad. This is the newest of their fleet. Like I was mentioning earlier, they have all high-speed lifts, and honestly, it's kind of needed. These runs are really, really long, and obviously have a good amount of vertical as well. So I can't imagine, I never really skied this without the high speeds, because they all came basically after when I started visiting Granite Peak. These had to be some really, really long lift lines. So it's one of the few in the Midwest that I feel like it's definitely justified. But as you can see how this is laid out here, this whole pod of skiing is pretty difficult because of this pitch that you're seeing right in front of us here. So this zone, this pod of skiing, is definitely not recommended for anybody that's a beginner or slightly intermediate. If you feel a little nervous, I would definitely practice on some of the stuff on the central pod, then work your way over to this. Because you can see this, what's underneath us right now, definitely has some pitch to it. So now I will say the nice thing about these high-speed quads, man, you can get a lot of vertical in very, very quickly. I would say Granite Peak has probably one of the most lappable situations as far as lift infrastructure of anywhere in the Midwest. It's just very lappable because of these high speeds. Getting off here, we're going to take that same Overlook trail, but this time we're going to duck into Idlewild, which is kind of the next one in the line there. And then we're going to take that down and take Wildwood, which is kind of the next cut over from the one we just did, Sidewinder. So you'll notice a lot of similarities in a lot of these runs. The other one kind of take a little bit more of a dog leg to the left hand. This one's a little bit more direct, and obviously as we get closer to the lift, you're going to start to see those lines start to go a little more straight. So you can see this one's pretty much straight on, and at the very end, there's just a slight dog leg to get back to the lift. Again, kind of flattens out here. They do a great job, I have to say. Granite Peak has done an amazing job over the last 5 years adding more rollers and snow features to some of these flatter sections to kind of give them a little more personality, which I really respect, especially when we get to the other side, the western side. You'll see a lot more of that. This area in here does flatten out quite a bit, but still, it's a good speed run. You get a lot of turns in, and again, the length of these runs, especially for where it's located, is pretty dang impressive. So we're going to run this one in, then we're going to do one of my favorites in this pod of skiing, White Wolf. So this is White Wolf. This is basically right underneath the chair. Pretty much a direct fall line. The next three of these runs, so the White Wolf, Carver, and Superstition, are by far my favorite. And honestly, this pod of skiing, outside of the front face, this is my favorite pod. As you'll see when we get over to the western side, it has a little bit of a longer run out. So this run out at the bottom even gets longer. So that's why that area tends to fall a little bit short for me when it comes to like what I prefer in skiing. These next three runs are really, really fun. They have a really solid pitch to them, and there is certainly still a little bit of a run out going on with that L shape of Granite Peak, but it's a lot less than some of the other areas that we'll ski a little bit later in the POV. But these runs are super lappable. They're super fun. Man, I just really enjoy these next three that we're going to do. So we're going to run this one in, then we're going to do Carver. All right, so this one we're going to take Carver down to Wedgewoods, down to Stonebridge. There's a lot of little connector trails, and we actually do miss some of those towards the bottom of this. But I was going back and forth on whether I like this run or Superstition more. I think it's Carver, though, simply because it's just a little bit less traversing back over. It's a little bit more of a direct, like, boom, 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 lappable run between this and White Wolf. So these are awesome runs. They have a really good pitch to them, especially for the Midwest, especially for Wisconsin. They do a great job keeping these up, grooming them. I mean, this is some really, really good lappable skiing over here. And then again, they add some of these rollers and features at the bottom. This is kind of that zone where there's just a bunch of like spider web of different connecting runs. If you take a left there, that's going to take you back to the main kind of pod of skiing. If you take the right, what we did, this is going to take you over to Cupid Express. So obviously it does flatten out a little bit as you get towards the bottom here, but again, they put these little rollers in here, which are pretty fun, and I really enjoy that. So we'll run this one in, then we're going to do Superstition. I didn't mention this earlier, but this upper run right here is technically called Rendezvous. On our left-hand side, you're going to see some runs, some kind of like cliffy shoot things. I did not ski those just because the conditions were pretty rough. I take a look over there. We'll show you some of that at the end, some more on-screen footage. I think I've only skied those runs maybe a couple of times my entire life just because the conditions have to be pretty much really good in order to do that. So this is Superstition. This is a really good one. You can see the pitch is super duper solid. And then again, here's your split. So you go to the right, you go to the left. That's going to take you to 2 different pods of skiing here. We're going to take that right-hand section here, and this is going to kind of feed us all the way back over to the Cupid Express lift. Now, if you take that left-hand section, you can follow that all the way down to the main chalet area that you come out from over there. So this time we're going to take the rendezvous, kind of traverse over. We'll take a look again at those cliffs and those steeper little shoot runs that are on our left-hand side up there that we didn't get to ski because of the conditions. But then we're going to take what I would consider probably the easiest way down from that pod of skiing if you want to get back over. And this is kind of why beginners don't want to really head over to that pod of skiing. There's just not really any easy way down from there. And we'll talk a little bit more about Granite Peak's lack of like top to bottom beginner run when we get over to the front side. But this is Woodspur, and then we'll take this down to the beginner run mystery with that mid-load station from the Blitzen Lift. So as you can see, there's some solid pitch even here too. So again, this is kind of I would say Granite Peak's like Achilles heel is that they just don't have a ton of beginner top to bottom terrain. I know that's something they're working on. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. That's the mid station right there. And then basically this is going to be the beginner zone right down here. You can see the slow sign. On our right-hand side there, that is the Santa lift. That's a 2004 that I call triple. I didn't get the ride. I've actually never ridden that lift. Every time I'm here, it's only running on very high-capacity days or weekends, holidays, and I'm usually not here. But this is their big beginner run. Obviously, very, very mellow pitch, wide open. And then our left-hand side is the Grom Park, which we're going to do a lap in just a second. I love this Grom Park. It is one of my favorite things about Granite Peak, and one of the things I think a lot of ski areas should be doing more of is get these beginner terrain parks, especially how expansive this one is. You'll see in a minute. It's crazy. But you can see they have a really good beginner setup. They just don't have the top to bottom run. So it's going to be a mid-load station. Now, I will say their beginner run at the mid-load station is probably equal to a lot of smaller Midwest ski areas, full top to bottom runs. So definitely don't write it off or anything. But one thing I do want to point out is that if you are going to Granite Peak as a beginner, like a true beginner, lower intermediate, you might have very, very limited options. We'll show you some of the runs that you can do from top to bottom, but you're going to most likely start at that mid-load station first. I'll zoom back up and we're going to take a look at this Grom Park because I love this thing. This is going to have mostly ride-on features, really small, but it's laid out in a really nice slope style format. It's going to have some smaller jumps, and it's long. I mean, you can see it goes pretty much the length of that mid-load station run. Man, they do such a good job with their parks here, and I just wish that more ski areas put this much time and effort into the beginner's park. It is phenomenal what they're able to do here. They switch things out pretty regularly, and I love that it's like in its own dedicated zone. It's not just like an offshoot of their other terrain park. This is literally just for beginner Groms that want to rip park. Like we need more of this in the industry. It's so cool to see this, and we're starting to see more of these beginner parks pop up, but this is awesome. My only critique is I think this needs a rope. I'd love to see a rope on this park because I think that would be fantastic, but mid-load station isn't so bad. Speaking of, we're going to ride this one in, and then we are going to take the Blitzen Lift up next, and I'll show you where that mid-load station is. So this is the Blitzen Lift. This is a 2001 Riblet Triple. It does have a mid station, which is really actually super important because like I was mentioning earlier, there's that steep section up top. So if you get off at the mid-load station, you kind of don't have to do any of that steeper section. So this is kind of Granite Peak's answer to obviously that steeper shape, right? That L shape that we keep talking about, where it's steep at the first third or so, and then the rest is kind of like that run out, little bit of a tamer pitch. This is how they kind of deal with that for beginners. So you get off at the mid-load station. So you'd obviously go from the carpet to this chair or the chair lift that was not running, the Santa lift. and then you get off at the mid-load station. You have your choice of either going right or left from here, and it all kind of is a pretty similar vibe. I'd recommend going to our looker's left side because that's going to be more beginner focused. On the right-hand side over there's a lot more traffic coming from runs like Sundance, which we'll do in a little bit, coming down and cutting through there. This is the original ski area. Like these couple of runs on our right-hand side here, this was like where the original rope toe, and then eventually it became a J-bar. This was it right here, and it was really just these runs. It only originally went to the mid station, then they expanded it. They added a second rope that went up the steeper section. Then they had a J-bar that went the entire run. So this is kind of how it's developed over time, expanding out to the east and the west. So that's pretty exciting. Speaking of, this ski area has a lot, and I mean a lot, of history. It's one of the oldest Midwest areas, opened in 1937, originally called Rib Mountain. We kind of talked about that earlier. So here's the mid station right here, so you'd get off if you're a beginner. And another good tip I have is you can load at this mid station. So if you just want to lap this steeper section, this is the way to do it. And I love doing this. When I come to Granite Peak, this is normally what I'm doing, is actually lapping these few runs in front of us here and just grabbing the mid-load station and going straight up so we don't have that run out at the bottom. You just go right back in, boom, boom, boom. Usually Sundance, Carmie's Couloir, Woodspur, those are all really good runs that you can lap from here. But this ski area got founded basically in the mid-30s, basically a community ski area. And eventually they brought in Fred Pabst Jr. to help run this area in the 30s. Yes, the same one that is the heir to the PBR beer company. It kind of went through some owners through the years. 1964, Carmie Olivia, which Carmie's Couloir, which we're going to do in just a second, that's named after him. Then in 1986, Neil Mix purchased the lease. So this is all leased land from the state of Wisconsin. So nobody, like, they don't own the land per se. They lease the land from the Wisconsin DNR, and basically they do leases, and then they put their equipment on there. So it got passed through a couple different operators throughout the years, and then the biggest change came in 2000 when Charles Skinner, the current owner, signed a 30-year lease, which is actually coming up. I'm curious to see what will happen with that. And that's when it was rebranded to Granite Peak. Couple of big milestones here. 2001, the ski area expanded to the eastern side that we just skied. In 2002, the ski area expanded to the western side, which we'll get to a little bit later. And then in 2000, one of the biggest, I think, was in 2003, they added the first high-speed six-pack here, which really cut down those lift times significantly. We talked about earlier how those are some really long lift lines. Well, being able to cut that pretty much probably less than half was significant for Granite Peak given its size and how long some of those runs were. Then they added high speeds and both other pods of skiing to now where every pod of skiing has a high speed lift on it. This Blitzen Lift is really the only other lift that you occasionally will ride that's not a high speed, and you technically really don't have to. The only time you really need to is maybe to get over to the eastern side, but you can technically still do that from Cupid if you really want to. So it's really impressive the amount of reinvesting that has happened here in the last 25 years under Charles Skinner has been absolutely crazy. And they have some plans for future expansion. We'll talk about that at the very end, and maybe even to fix their issue with their lack of top to bottom beginner runs. So we'll touch on all that at the very end. We'll talk about that. At the top, we're going to take Carmie's Couloir, and then we're actually going to just hop into the mid-load station, come back up, and then do Sundance. This is what I like to do when I'm skiing Granite Peak. I love this top section. The pitch is amazing. The run out at the bottom sometimes gets to me, and I think this is a great way to combat that. So basically, you're just going to lap right underneath here. Carmie's Couloir is this like steep little kind of like chute. You can fit a handful of turns in here. And then basically it's going to feed you right on out to that mid-load station. And I love lapping this. This is definitely one of my favorite things to do when I go to Granite Peak. I love lapping these. And boom, mid-load station, back up to the top. And now we're going to do Sundance, which I think is one of their signature runs. It's kind of the main run that kind of comes down straight into the chalet there. They do have moguls on skiers' left-hand side, lookers' right. They were just completely glazed over this day. You know that I love skiing moguls, but unfortunately today was not the day for that. But this is a really solid run. You can see beautiful views. It's one of the highest points in the area, so you got a lot of good vistas coming down. This has got a really solid pitch. It's really wide open, so this is a really good one If you're kind of want to get used to some of this steeper terrain and you want to eventually make it over to the east side, this run is a good one to test that just because of how wide open it is. And it flattens out a little bit, and then you're going to have this nice little run out kind of into the chalet area. Now, this is kind of the zone where you can either go back to the Blitzen Lift here, or you can go back to what we'll do is we'll take the 6-pack. The 6-pack does see a lot of traffic. Sometimes I'd like to mix it up, go over to the Blitzen Lift, but you can still access everything that we just skied. You can technically even go over to the eastern pod from the 6-pack, and we'll show you that in just a second on how we're going to ride that up, take a kind of a traverse run all the way across called Summit Trail, and that'll kind of dump us out at the top of Sundance. So we're going to run this one in. We're going to go past the chalet, take a left, head on over to that 6-pack, and then we are going to take that up and do the slalom run. All right, this is the Comet Lift, a 2003 Leitner Palma 6-pack. This one was one of the earliest lifts. Now it is one of the older lifts in the fleet, but it's still, you know, having a high speed coming out of this main area. It was a huge game changer in 2003. I remember growing up, it was a huge deal for this ski area because it was such a big area, and you can see this lift line is so long. Being able to cut that time down significantly was huge. Now you'll see also below us a lot of snowmaking. Granite Peak has invested obviously in lift infrastructure, but the other thing they've invested very heavily in is snowmaking. They have tower guns basically lining almost all of their ski runs. Their capacity is phenomenal, and they can get open very, very quickly, especially with good temperatures. And that's why they're able to open with so much terrain early, but then also stay open late because they're able to make so much snow going into obviously the colder months and then save that snow into March. Below us, what you see is they're kind of their main pod of skiing. This is what I would say is their like bread and butter central pod. This is going to be the main zone now. This lift sees a lot of traffic. So again, almost everyone's going to either ride this or Blitzen kind of out of the chalet area. That's kind of how you have to get out. Most people are going to take this lift. So if it does get crowded and you want to ski that eastern area, take Blitzen. You could even do the mid-load station, whatever you need to do. But this area does see a little more traffic. This includes their terrain park area that we'll get to go to in just a little bit. But as I was mentioning, you can technically get to either of the other pods from this lift. We're going to show you how we do that, at least to get to the eastern side in just a second here. We're going to take this up, and then we're going to take Summit Trail across. So this is a pretty flat little area here. Obviously, if you're going to ski the main pod, you take kind of like a left-hand turn here and go into those runs, which we'll do a little bit later. We're going to swing past the ski patrol building up top here. There's the old chairlift terminals on our right-hand side there that used to run kind of up the middle. I kind of missed that chair. I wish that was here. But this area is pretty slow, so you want to carry some speed as you go through. Now, this is how you would access that eastern area. Sundance, the run that we're going to do slalom, you're going to cut through this little area up here and then kind of coat through. Now, again, you're going to want to carry some speed through here because it gets a little slow, especially if it's, you know, that springtime. So most people, if you're skiing like Slalom, Sundance, they're probably going to be taking the Blitzen chair just because it's a little bit easier, but you can technically go. And if you continued this all the way across, you can go all the way to the eastern side from the top of the 6-pack chair. Instead, we're going to duck into this left-hand side here and take a run called Slalom. Now, this run does not see a lot of action. This one and the next one that we're going to do, Elk Run, great runs that do not see a lot of traffic. So you can find core deep into the day. If it's a powder day, you can probably find some powder in there too because it's in a weird zone. It's in between the two lifts. So it's like not a lot of people think to go over to this zone. So still has a really nice pitch to it. It's a little narrower than the run that we just did Sundance, but still a phenomenal run. This will feed you on down to the bottom area, which is like meadows and hot cocoa. And then again, you're going to have that choice of either going to the skier's right-hand side, which will bring you to the Blitzen chair, or you go left side, which we'll do, which will take you down to the 6-pack. One thing I do want to mention really quickly about the 6-pack is that it does get crowded, in that zone at the bottom there, you'll notice all the slow signs when we get a little bit lower down. There's a lot of traffic coming from obviously like 3 different ways. You got, you know, directly head on, from the left, from the right. So you just want to just make sure you control your speed as you go through there. Keep your head on a swivel. Just be smart when you're going through that zone. Do not fly through that zone because there is going to be people everywhere. So just be mindful of that as you kind of get down towards that chalet area, because people are crisscrossing all over the place trying to get to different chairs, trying to get over to the 6-pack. You just want to be a little bit careful as you kind of get down to that area down there. So we're going to ride this one in, then we're going to go up and do another amazing run / hidden secret run, Elk Run. All right, so this is going to be Elk Run. So instead of taking that trail kind of back behind the ski patrol hut, we're going to take it almost to about where the ski patrol is, and then we're going to cut to the left-hand side and duck into that Elk Run. This is, again, another run that just doesn't see a lot of traffic. I really like this run. It kind of feels like you're weaving through the forest a little more than some of the other runs on this pod of skiing. And again, it just doesn't see as much traffic, so you can still find cord, powder, all that is still usually available. On our right-hand side here is a pocket of trees. It's called Rock Pile Woods. You can probably guess there's a bunch of rocks back there and some little cliffs and stuff like that. Obviously not enough snow to be skiing that today, but if they do get pounded on, a really good area to kind of jump into the woods over there as well. So this one will kind of come down. It's going to dog leg back and forth and kind of shoot you back over to the 6-pack. And again, has a solid, really nice pitch at the top. Does start to flatten out a little bit down to the bottom. But I think it's a really solid run. And again, just the fact that it doesn't get a lot of traffic is really nice. So if you see some of these other runs that we're going to do a little bit later, such as Exhibition, Upper and Lower Dusky, all those runs, if they start to get crowded, go find a run like Slalom or Elm Creek, because I guarantee you there's probably not going to be nearly as much traffic on those runs. So keep an eye out for that, because these are some really, really solid runs that I like, that have a very similar feel to some of the other ones, but again, just see a little bit less traffic. So we're going to run this one in, then we're going to do the Race Hill Exhibition. All right, so this is going to be Exhibition. This is their race hill, so they do sometimes have it occasionally closed for racing. Solid pitch. This is a good one. I like this one a lot. Very lappable, obviously right off the 6-pack. What's nice about this run, it's separated from the bulk of the traffic from Birch, Miracle, those runs, and like Dusky. This one kind of shoots you off more to the skier's right-hand side, so you're not clumped in together with that big open lower Dusky that we'll ski in just a minute, so it's a little bit less traveled. So I like lapping this one. This is really good. It's a solid run. There's a reason they race on it, right? It's got a really good pitch. It still does have, obviously, still have that L shape to it a little bit, just flatten out towards the bottom. But this is a really good lappable run, and it's just the way that it's facing the 6-pack and the way it kind of juts off from the main traffic. I would say that this is definitely one of my favorites in this pod of skiing. Between this and Elk Run, and even Slalom, I like these. These are some good runs that don't get as much traffic as some of the ones we'll ski in a little bit. So make sure you guys check these ones out. They're definitely worth it. We're going to run this one in. Then we're going to do their terrain park, which I absolutely love. And I honestly think it's one of the best parks in the Midwest. We'll go check that out next. So this is kind of a mix of Upper Dusky, and then we cut off to Sky High. Their parks are awesome, by the way. I think as far as chairlift parks, Granite Peak is definitely one of the best out there. They have such a slope style feel with multiple jumps, multiple hits. There's not many top to bottom parks like this. It's pretty amazing. So this is technically Upper Dusky, but then this is where you cut over and take Sky High. And this will kind of enter you into the lower part of the park, which will be eventually Aspen. But there's a few features in this section as well, including one of their biggest jumps right in front of us here. Really nicely shaped. I am absolutely impressed with their parks, and they've really stepped it up the last handful of years. Their crew is so good at what they do. They change them up regularly. They have a really good flow. Awesome. Not to mention the Grom Park's amazing, but this park as well, super duper awesome. I love it. And the fact that you're on a high speed with this many hits, there's not many parks like this in the Midwest, I have to say. Like, if you like doing multiple jumps, if you like doing multiple hits in a run and still like the lappability factor, this park is it. There's not many out there that have this going on. So I really, really appreciate that from Granite Peak and the team over there. They're doing a great job with their park scene. I do want to let you guys know that Dusky has a very significant meaning. It actually came off the map for a little while. The trail name did, and then came back, I think, about 5 or 6 years ago. So that was awesome, because it's actually named in honor of Joseph P. Dusky Jr., who was an Army Staff Sergeant and who received the Purple Heart for dying in combat during World War II. So it was a local resident of Wausau area, and really significant. I'm so happy that they brought that back in the most recent trail map renaming and kind of reworking, because I think it's really special and something really cool. So we're going to run this one in, and then we're going to head over to Black Bear and Dusky. So we're going to get started. It kind of starts with a little bit of Upper Dusky, but if we hang to the left-hand side here, skier's left, it kind of has this offshoot that's technically labeled Black Bear. So this is right under the lift. This is kind of the run that you're going to be looking at as you take the run up. Obviously right next to the park here. Solid pitch here, especially this upper section. Really love railing turns in this lake zone. This is super fun. It's so lappable. And again, these next couple of runs are just bread and butter Granite Peak. So this is technically Black Bear, this little offshoot that you come in here, but it all kind of funnels you into the same. And then this is the zone where things do get a little bit crowded, because you have a bunch of runs coming in. You have Birch, you have Miracle, you have Upper Dusky, and then obviously Black Bear, which is kind of in the same. They all kind of merge at this point down here. And that's what I was mentioning earlier, where Exhibition kind of goes off to the other side. That's where it's kind of nice, because you don't have as much traffic going on. Obviously, it's a not very crowded day today, but this is where kind of all those runs would come in, and you'd start to see some people kind of building up in this little zone here. It's wide open, so it doesn't get like too crowded, but it's definitely one of those zones where you got to kind of slow things down a little bit, you know, keep an eye out on what's going on, who's turning where, things like that. But the lappability of these next few runs are really, really fun, and really some of my favorite. Between those couple on the eastern side and then these runs in the front, these are by far my favorite runs at Granite Peak. So we're going to run this one in, and then we're going to do some of the easier ways to go top to bottom at Granite Peak, Birch and Miracle. So this is Birch. This is going to have a little more pitch than Miracle, so obviously I'd start over at Miracle, which we'll do next, but this would be the next progression, and then from here, you have a couple options. I personally would recommend going over to Sundance next, or you could do the run that we just did, Black Bear to Lower Dusky, but I would recommend almost like Sundance but more, because it's probably going to be less crowded and it's a little more wide open, but that would be your progression of terrain here. So as you can see, it's got some pitch to it. I mean, that's the thing about Granite Peak, is like that the upper section always has a little bit of bite to it, no matter where you go on the ski area. Like, it's always going to have a little pitch, and you'll even see the next run, Miracle, which is technically their easiest way to go top to bottom, still is going to have that bite. It's going to be a little bit less. But that's why I recommend, if you are going to Granite Peak and you are a pure beginner / really low intermediate, take a minute and think about it. Like, I would definitely, if it's more than just you and your group and you're going with a bunch of people and they love to ski steeper stuff and all that, fine. But if it's just you and I had a choice, I would say develop your skills at your local hill first, feel very comfortable skiing all of your blues and some of your blacks, and then go to Granite Peak. Because the worst thing you could do is buy your tickets. They're obviously a little bit on the higher side for Midwest. Drive all the way up there and then be disappointed because you're only going to be able to ski 1 or 2 runs that are true top to bottom. It's just not the best area for true beginners. Like, if you're learning to ski in your local, then by all means, like, they have a great learn to ski program, all of that. But they have a really limited in-between library of runs. You basically have your very beginner runs that we did earlier with that mid station, and eventually we'll go check out that carpet. Phenomenal there, right? Then you go to your more advanced runs. Great breadth there. They have a lot of different advanced runs, as you've seen as we've skied through some of those sections. But where they're lacking a little bit is that lower intermediate, upper beginner terrain. And really, it's just these two runs, Birch and Miracle. And even those could be considered kind of like a little bit of a step. There's like that zone that they're missing. And that's what's really tough about Granite Peak. And again, just level expectations, because it's a drive for a lot of people. It can be very expensive. So I would recommend develop your skills locally to feel very confident in all of your blues, most of your blacks probably at your local ski area, then go to Granite Peak, because you're going to just have a way better time. Again, unless you're doing purely beginner stuff or you're going with a group and you're just like, I'm going to sacrifice it, but that would be my recommendation. So this is Miracle. This is going to be the easiest way to go from the very top to the bottom. And again, you want to make sure that you have some skill level here, basically be very comfortable with your blues, maybe even some of your blacks at your local ski area before heading out to do this. This is going to be the easiest way down for sure. And again, it kind of just dog legs all the way around, so it kind of tries to cut off some of that pitch off of the front side. Very fun and lappable runs, Miracle and Birch. They're really awesome. If you are brand new to Granite Peak and you want to, just nervous about terrain, these are going to be the two runs that you're going to want to start with. Now, what I would recommend is after you kind of get comfortable with Miracle, obviously go to Birch, then I would almost head on over and do Sundance, because I think Sundance, with how wide open it is, and then has that like run out at the bottom towards the chalet, I think that would be a better stepping stone than trying to do something like Upper Dusky, Black Bear, because they're just a little bit tighter. The last thing I want to note is this is the last run that we could do that will be lit. So everything that we just skied, including this run, is open for night skiing. Everything that we will ski after this run in the western area is closed at 4 o'clock. So if you want to ski that western area, you just want to make sure that you come before 4 o'clock. So we're going to run this one in, then we're going to head on over to that western area. So we're going to take a run called Hawks Ridge, which is just kind of this like side cut on this left-hand side here. This kind of just traverses you on over. Now this little zone here is kind of where the crisscrossing goes. If you're coming back from the western side, that's how you're going to do it. And if you're going to the western side, that's how you're going to do it. So just, be mindful of that. There's going to be some crisscrossing going on. I'll show you how we get back to the main area actually at the very end of this video. And then this run is actually White Lightning. And then this takes us on down to Sunset. So it's this like long run, obviously a little bit pitch at the top, and then once we get down to the sunset area down lower here, it kind of starts to mellow out a little bit and then has this really long kind of winding path that brings you all the way down to the Dasher Express. Now these runs, I will say, they're some of the longest in the ski area, but they also have the most run out. And that's why this pod of skiing for me personally is not my favorite. I would say it's just because of the amount of run out. And when we get to main event, you'll be able to see that very, very visually. Actually, when we get onto the lift, you'll be able to see that very visually as well, how long that run out is compared to some of the other pods of skiing at Granite Peak. But we'll run this one in, and then we're going to take up the Dasher Express. So this is the Dasher Express. This is a 2012 Lightner Palma high-speed quad. This was much needed because you can see the length of this is very, very long here. underneath us here, that's that run out that I'm talking about. And you can see the trees too. So I want to make a quick note here. Almost this entire pod of skiing has tree skiing in between some of these runs. Obviously with the conditions and the way that it was this season, wasn't able to capture any of that. But that is something that a lot of kids love because it's got a mellower pitch to it. You can kind of bounce into the woods after that steeper section. Kids love that stuff. Now these next two runs that we're gonna do, I have to say Timberwolf and Panorama blew me away a little bit because I don't usually ski these runs because I usually go directly like under the lift, most lappable. But I will say these two runs might be my favorite runs in this pod of skiing. For some reason they don't feel as much like run out, and I love the fact, especially for Panorama, you'll see what Granite Peak has done. They've gotten really creative with this, like the run out section, building a bunch of rollers and different like airtime hills and things like that that are really, really fun. I really love that they're doing that. They're doing everything they can to make that the lower section a little more interesting. So we're gonna ride this one up to the top, then we're gonna actually go over and do Timberwolf, which I thought was a really underrated run. So this top section up here is called Top Notch, and then this will feed you on down to Timberwolf. This kind of just runs the length of all these runs. On our left-hand side will be that Panorama run that we'll do in just a little bit. I like this run because it kind of like has a little bit of a moderate pitch to it. So again, if you're skiing this pod, these couple of runs, White Lightning and then Timberwolf would be really good ones to get started, and then start to work your way into some of the steeper stuff that's kind of under the chair. And to me, it just feels like it's got a little bit less run out than some of the ones under the chair. Now again, you are gonna see some cross traffic when you kind of get up to this zone here. You're gonna see people kind of cutting in, but I really enjoyed this little run. It's got a little shelf here, and then you can get some steeper turns in. I just like the dogleg action of it rather than just a straight, straight shot style run. I love that it has a little bit of a dogleg to it. So it's a really fun run. And then once we get down to the bottom here, you're going to kind of start to see some of that terrain that we were talking about where they added some of those rollers. We saw some of that when we came on in, but there's going to be even more over the next couple of runs that we're going to do, especially once we get into Gemstone and Red Quartz. So we're going to run this one in, then we're going to go up to Panorama, and you'll get to see Gemstone, which will be really exciting. So we're going to take the same path here. We're just going to cut off a little earlier, and this is going to be Panorama. It's going to have a little more pitch up at the top, not going to dogleg quite as much. But then this will feed us down to this Gemstone and Red Quartz area and Timber Pass. These little zones, actually, I love them. They've been really fun because you come in with so much speed from that top section that adding these little rollers that they have towards the bottom in this run are actually quite a blast. And this is another run that I think caught me by surprise. I just didn't ski it very often up until like filming these POVs, and I found myself lapping this one a couple times after I was done. So this was a really fun one. I like this one a lot. Again, it has a solid pitch up top, kind of takes a little bit of a dog leg to that left-hand side there. And then this is where you're going to start to get into this gemstone region here where they build these terrain features, both on the right and left side here. So Red Quartz is on our left, and then gemstone on our right. We're going to take that right-hand path, and you can see just some of these rollers coming through. And then this meets up with Timber Pass a little bit lower. But I love that they're getting creative with this zone and adding a little more snow features in there, adding some fun things. Like, this is the kind of stuff I love seeing, and kids absolutely love this stuff. I mean, you have so much speed going through this zone that you can get some nice air over these. It's super fun, and a good way to use this terrain that honestly is pretty flat and pretty chill compared to some of the rest of the run. So we're gonna run this one in, then we're gonna do Legends to Gemstone, and then Red Quartz actually this time. All right, so this is going to be Legends. As you can see, we get closer to the lift. It's just going to be a more direct fall line. So this one's pretty much almost spot on. Main event will be pretty much the direct fall line. But again, this one will feed you right on down to those two runs that we're kind of just looking at there, that Gemstone and Red Quartz. We're going to take that left-hand cut, though. And again, you're going to see those features, those snow features they put in there, some rollers, some fun stuff. But this upper section, man, it is so much fun. It's got such good pitch, and you're coming out with such great speed. You can really rail some really solid turns in this upper section. And then again, I love what they're doing with this at the bottom here, adding some rollers and bank turns and things like that. That's super fun, and I'm glad that they're doing that and acknowledging, like, yeah, this lower section needs a little something to kind of spice it up a little bit. These are probably the runs, if I were lapping this zone, I think it would be between these three runs here: Panorama, Legends, and then maybe occasionally Main Event, which we'll do next. So we're going to run this one in, then we're going to do Main Event. Here it is, Main Event. This is kind of be their direct pitch line right under the chair. I love this one for just lappability, but as you'll see when you get towards the bottom, man, does it have some run out. There's no denying that, but this upper pitch is super duper fun. I love this. It's really fun to get these like actually solid pitch turns in. There's not a lot of terrain in the Midwest that you get this opportunity to like kind of rail these really nice like high pitch turns, and Granite Peak has a lot of terrain just like that. And then once you hit about this section here, you can see it kind of just mellows out and you're just kind of gliding along in here. So this is where, again, if they have those wooded sections open, a lot of people jump into the woods and kind of bop around in there. Unfortunately, there wasn't enough natural snow to be doing that during my trip this time. But in the past, I've definitely have done that, and kids love doing this because it is a mellower pitch in there. So it's a lot easier. It's a good introduction to tree skiing. But as you can see, really, really long, like secondary pitch here, kind of going all the way down back to the bottom terminal here. But the fact that you even have this length of a run is kind of wild, especially when you're so used to skiing some of the smaller areas in the southern Wisconsin and northern Illinois region. So we're going to run this one in, then we're going to start to do the other side of the lift, which will be kind of your Infinity, Bobcat, over on that side, and Western Frontier. So we'll run this in, we'll get started with Infinity. All right, so this is Infinity. Now, they do usually let this get bumped up. It wasn't when I was there, most likely because of the freeze-thaw cycle. I bet you they had to probably push some stuff out just to kind of get this to be skiable again, just because of the crazy weather that we were dealing with that last year. But really good pitch to it. Obviously kind of does more of a little bit of a dog leg over here, and then it's going to feed you into kind of a separate little feeder trail that kind of cuts you more to the skier's left-hand side, and then it'll eventually merge back up with that main area there. But we actually take silver birch instead of going back under the lift, and we're going to do that over the next couple of runs here, where we're going to take that little side cut here. When this is bumped up, I actually have a lot of fun skiing this one as well, Infinity. It's a really good run. Again, it has a very similar fall line to that of Main Event, and with bumps on it, it is awesome. So we're going to run this one in, then we're going to go up and do just an offshoot called Bobcat, and we're not going to run that all the way down. We're just going to kind of show you what that little offshoot looks like, and then we'll go and do Western Frontier. So this is almost going to be the same run. We're basically just going to show you the very top section of this so you can see the Bobcat version of this run. So it's just kind of a different entry point. So you're going to go a little further down that cat track. So pretty similar run. I mean, it's kind of the same thing. It's a little bit tamer, I would say, than doing the direct infinity line kind of coming in. But, you know, it's a good way to mix it up and things like that. So we're going to run this one a few more seconds. Then we'll kind of come back up and do that Western Frontier. And last but not least in this pod is Western Frontier. So this is going to be the furthest you can go on this pod of skiing, and the last one that we have on this video for this pod of skiing. So this kind of just follows that that cat track all the way back and around, and then it does have, again, a little steeper drop off as you kind of come around the corner here. This one's really fun too to mix it up. It's not my favorite run in this pod of skiing, but I think it's a good mix. You know, if you're just looking to mix things up every now and then, sees a little bit less traffic than some of the ones right under the lift for obvious reasons because you're coming around. But I would say that this is probably the easiest of these runs in here. So to go probably like Western Frontier, Panorama, and then like all the Legends main event and Infinity are kind of all grouped together and pretty similar as far as pitch goes. But Western Frontier would be a good one. After you kind of get used to your Timberwolf Panorama, then you could probably try this one out as well. And then obviously go to more of the direct fall lines such as Legends, main event, and then Infinity. This pod of skiing is, you know, I think it was a good addition. I think the length of it is really cool and unique, certainly for the area. Again, the one thing that it just always gets me on is that run out towards the end. Like the first third of the run is like super fun, and then I spend 2/3 of the run just like wanting to get back to the chair to get back up and do that upper section. In Matthew's ideal world, I would love to have a mid-load station. I know it's not feasible. It doesn't make any sense. But in my ideal world, I would love to have a mid-load station where I could just like literally just do that upper section because that upper pitch is super duper nice. And honestly, I'm complaining about skiing a little bit more. You can't complain too much about having slightly longer runs, right? I totally understand why they did what they did, but we're gonna run this one in, then I'm actually gonna show you how to get from here back to the main chalet area using Top Notch and working your way back on over to Miracle. So at the top here, we're going to do kind of what we did when we opened this pod of skiing. We're going to take that cat track top-notch trail that kind of cuts all the way across, and then that is pretty much going to directly meet up with Miracle. And as I was mentioning in some of the other, you know, runs when we're going through, like, you know, White Lightning, Timberwolf, you just want to be a little careful because this is the zone where you're going to get all of that cross traffic going back and forth, right? Because this is how you get to the main chalet, and that's how people from the main chalet area get back to this area. So you just want to take it slow, obviously keep your head on a swivel, look uphill when you're merging, all that fun stuff, because there is going to be a little bit of traffic going on as well. So this will kind of take you on over, you're going to cut through, and then basically once we kind of make this punch through these like tree pocket here, this is going to be your Miracle run right here. And this is the runway that we just did a little bit earlier. You know, that'd be the easiest run top to bottom, and that'll kind of feed you through. A wipe out there, I don't know what happened there. Fun sometimes. But then obviously this will kind of dogleg around, meet back up with that lower Dusky section, and feed you right on down to that high-speed 6-pack that kind of comes right out of the chalet area. We're going to run this one in, and then I'm going to show you the beginners area, the upper beginners. We didn't do the lower carpet because that was closed, but we're going to do the bigger carpet, which I'll talk a little bit more about once we get onto that carpet. So we'll run this one in, and we'll see you over there. So this is their main beginner area. This is the blizzard carpet. It's a really impressive, actually, beginner area. This carpet's really long. It's really wide and spaced out really nicely. The pitch is perfect for beginners. Again, you go from this, you go to the mid-load station, and I think the biggest issue that Granite Peak has is that going from the mid-load station run up to Miracle is a jump. They need just something in between. And at the very end of this video, we'll talk about the expansion and how that is slated to fix that, hopefully. But this would be kind of where you would get things started here. Obviously, you have your beginner area right on our left and right here, right? But then being able to jump into this like Enchanted Forest area is just super cool because it's like a groomed run, but it makes you feel like you're actually cutting through the trees. So I love that they included a run like that in their little beginners area. I think it's fantastic. So we'll run this one in, and then we're going to do the Enchanted Forest. Love it. So this is it, Enchanted Forest. This kind of just like weaves through the woods over here. You can see that triple chair that we were riding a little bit earlier. Again, nothing crazy. It's about a groomer's width, so, you know, give you enough space to kind of make some turns in through here. But if you're a beginner, I feel like this would feel really cool to be able to like feel like you're going through the woods instead of just being in this wide open, big open area. So obviously this would be a good stepping stone to kind of get used to being forced to make some tighter radius turns. And then obviously this just kind of feeds you right back into that beginner area with that carpet right in front of us there. So we're just going to run that down, and that's going to be the full view of Granite Peak ski area. Granite Peak. So we did miss some things along the way, so let's talk about those really quick. We mentioned the trees. We missed basically all of the tree skiing that they have. There hasn't been many times that I've been there that the tree skiing has been really good, and I'll give you a couple reasons. The first is that Granite Peak, hence the name, is all rock. So if there's not adequate coverage, you are going to destroy your skis. Like, I'm just telling you that right now. Make sure that they have a lot of good coverage before you start diving into the trees, because there is like no dirt in there. It is just all rock. So if you're punching through, I guarantee you're going to have some course shots on your skis. Generally speaking, and this goes for anywhere that you ski, if you don't see people in the woods, you probably don't want to be the first one to go in there. There's a wise man once told me, if there's some untouched powder somewhere a couple days after it snows, there's probably a reason for that. So just be mindful of that. If you don't see people cutting through the trees, odds are you probably don't want to be the first one to be doing that. We missed all of the little chutes, the double black diamond, like chute, couloir, like cliffy area up at the top. I have honestly only skied these a couple of times. I've been going to Granite Peak for, I think, like 20 years now at this point. And I think I've only skied them maybe once or twice. Again, conditions just have to be right. They do try to make snow in that area, but again, it's just like they need a little bit of natural snow. It gets shaved off really quickly. So you kind of are waiting for that like perfect combination of getting some natural snow in there, having it build up a little bit, no freeze thaw cycles, things like that. Because it kind of is just like a really steep little like ravine that kind of comes down, maybe like a 1-2 turn chute sort of situation. And that's pretty much it off of that top run. So it's more of a novelty thing than it is actual skiing, in my opinion. We missed a couple of the connector kind of runs in between the Blitzen and the Cupid Express chair. A lot of those would be served by the Santa lift, or, you know, if you wanted to cut over using the mid-load station. So we miss kind of some of those, like the Eastern Escape that kind of comes back from that pod, Meadow Ridge, Cottonwood. I think we missed some of that kind of stuff. But, you know, they're all kind of really just pretty much connector trails. And then I think we technically missed Coyote Gulch, which is really just another little offshoot off of the Legends run. So I feel like we got a pretty good grasp of everything that Granite Peak has to offer. Man, I love Granite Peak. There's a couple things, again, that I'm not a huge fan of. Obviously, and it has nothing to do with Granite Peak themselves or the operation or anything. The shape of the hill in some of the areas, like the western pod, for example, it's a little bit much for me. Having to ski that like lower section could be a lot. But I gotta say, the terrain that they do have, especially on the eastern side and that mid-load station section, are super fun. That's like some of the best groomed black skiing I think the Midwest has to offer, honestly, and it's super lappable given its infrastructure. I love the fact that you can ski every run at this place using a high-speed lift, and having that right in the smack dab middle of Wisconsin is pretty dang impressive. The other thing that's great for Granite Peak is that it is a huge step up in size and scale compared to anything else in that region. And I remember going there for the first time being blown away with just how many runs and how long they are, right? I'm getting so nitpicky now because I've had the opportunity to ski kind of a lot of different areas now in my life. But the first time I went there, I just remember thinking, man, these runs are so long. They seem to go on forever. And for somebody that that's really important to, younger people that care a little bit less about having consistent terrain and lappability and all this stuff, and they just want really long, nice tree-lined runs, that's Granite Peak. You wouldn't think of Wausau as like a ski town, but it really is. I mean, there's a lot of really good bars and restaurants that overlook. You can see the hill in the background. It's lit up at night. It's super awesome. Granite Peak really has defined Wausau to some degree in their tourism in the wintertime. I guarantee you go to one of the restaurants down in town after a day of skiing and you're gonna run into other skiers. I would say the majority of traffic to Granite Peak comes from the south, either Milwaukee or Chicago. However, I will make an argument that there is a very good reason if you live in Minneapolis, especially on the west side of Minneapolis, like your Hudsons, your Woodbury, I think Granite Peak is a good change of pace. I think for driving under 3 hours to get this type of terrain is phenomenal. Technically, it has more vertical than some of the areas up north, such as Spirit and Giants Ridge. The runs are longer and their infrastructure is super impressive with 3 high-speed lifts. It's definitely worth checking out. And again, you can pair it up with a trip with a couple other areas as well, or you can just make a day trip out of it. I have day tripped Granite Peak several times from Minneapolis, and it's very, very doable. And the last thing I want to talk about with Granite Peak is their proposed expansion. This has been going on for a while. It has been approved. I know it's in the process. It's just going to take a very long time. The idea is to fill that gap between that beginner and intermediate level that they're missing. And what they're going to do is they're planning on expanding further past that western frontier run. And what happens to the terrain over there is it starts to kind of mellow out a little bit more. So then they can create runs that are going to be more top to bottom, beginner / lower intermediate runs, things that they kind of don't have right now. We actually did a video kind of highlighting that expansion on this channel previously, so I will definitely link that up in the corner if you want to learn more. Things have changed and it's always evolving because it's just a long process, but that'll give you a good understanding of what they're looking to do in that pod of skiing and how it would change some of the offerings that Granite Peak has, especially for that level of skiers. So we'll link that if you want to check out that video. All said and done, Granite Peak is an amazing stepping stone going from your middle of the line, average, smaller, medium-sized ski areas to now a large ski area. And I think that's what makes Granite Peak so special. Well, if you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Man, we got a lot of really awesome content coming up. The season is here. I'm super excited to be back on snow. But until next time, I hope everybody has a great week. Pray for that snow, and I'll see you out there.